longtime member of South Valley Unitarian Universal Society. And as we begin, please, any electronic devices, turn off or put on mute or something. We had an event last night that people bought at our auction, annual auction. If you don't know what that is, ask someone. We were all back in the 1890s, and people had these strange devices that none of us knew what they were, right? Because they pulled out their phone. We're like, what? What is that? I want to tell you that I got the chance to do the altar, and that centerpiece is Picasso Mona Lisa that our own Sutton Morgan did. She's an artist and teacher, and if you want to come up later and look closer, and the shawls are from our own prayer shawl ministry that we have here, and so this is an altar of love from all of us here at South Valley. And I invite you also to enjoy the chapel in the back of the sanctuary and note the joys and concerns in the book there, and Reverend Bob will read those. Please feel free to share in the book there. Children are always welcome in this sanctuary at all times during the service. If you'd like us to take care of your little ones during the service, we do have a nursery downstairs. And also, so you know, we broadcast the service on closed circuit TV downstairs if you did want to locate down there at any point during the service with a little one. And we have coffee and usually amazing goodies to go with that coffee after the service, and a really nice social time after. So please do come down and enjoy the company. And there are, finally, announcements in your order of service that have all these ways to enjoy and be part of this congregation, including joining the prayer shawl ministry, if you know how to knit, which I don't, but I am sure glad they made me one. And many ways to be part of this vibrant community. So welcome, everyone.
So I'm Judith Mayer, or Judy Mayer, member of the Board of Trustees, and I'm going to welcome you with our welcoming thing. In the words of Rumi, come, come, whoever you are. Whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears, you are welcome here. No matter where you've been, no matter where you're going, you are welcome here. No matter what body brought you in the door, no matter who you love, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all the time, or some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. If you come here with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society, and welcome.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Rick. I actually want to share that Rick is taking, first of all, good morning. I'm Reverend Bob. Good to see you all. I want to share that Rick is actually, one of the reasons today is so special musically is that Rick is taking a leave of absence from us for 7 weeks because he's going to be playing with the Broadway production of Wicked. How cool is that? He'll be in the pit playing synthesizer for 5 weeks at the Eccles, so you can go see him around. If you peer down over the pit, you can see him. and then he's going to be in Boise touring with the company for a couple of weeks. And so it's a great loss to us. He won't be here for rehearsals or Sundays. He is irreplaceable, but we will replace him, right, John? So, break a leg, Rick. We look forward to when you come back. I want to add, in addition to the morning coffee that we have going, there's also a fundraiser for No Kid Hungry for our Share the Plate recipient this coming 2 months. So go downstairs. There's a bake sale. There's brunch items, and I hope you can join us for that. So, also, if you haven't already signed up for a house meeting, I encourage you to do so. You can do that downstairs too. And these are, if you haven't heard of this, these are meetings of folks to discuss our upcoming search for a settled minister. I'm an interim. And also the pledge drive for next year and how those things overlap. And intersect. And these meetings are for everyone, whether you're a formal member or a friend, and no matter how long you've been here. So come on out, talk to your fellow congregants about the future of this fantastic congregation, this faith community. It's a great opportunity to just get right to the source there. And related to our pledge drive, I hate to point this out in worship service, but pledge collections for the current year have fallen behind. If for some reason folks are putting off fulfilling their pledge, now is the time to do that. Next week is our Stewardship Sunday, and we'll be talking all about the vibrant life of this congregation. But that vibrant life costs money, so please get those pledges in. Thank you. I also want to tell you about this stole that I'm wearing. It's a little more formal than my normal stole, right? Today we're talking about moral injury, and the person who has taught me most about moral injury is a guy named Reverend Chris Antal. Reverend Chris was my chaplain in Afghanistan, and we became very, very close, and still are close. After we came home, we both worked together at the VA, and we've done work with veterans in a lot of other settings, thinking about moral injury. Reverend Chris was also, he was an officer in the Army, and he was also active in speaking out against drone warfare. And eventually he resigned his commission as an officer in the Army out of protest because of what he thought about how we conduct drone warfare. So he no longer had any use for this stole. So when I was ordained, and he actually gave this sermon at my ordination back in last March, Reverend Chris gave me this stole. His official stole as an Army chaplain, and it means the world to me. I'm honored to wear it today. So I'd like to call us to celebrate by using the words of Reverend Gretchen Haley from our Colorado UU congregation. Reverend Gretchen says, "Let's not go building new walls around our hearts. We have already enough that keeps us from each other, enough that keeps us from ourselves. And the knowing of all that we have done, all that has been done to us and for us, the losses we've sustained, the love we avoided, the life we held too tight. For this hour, we practice showing up with a willingness to see, to be seen, to remember ourselves whole and still becoming better, to believe it is okay not to be okay, that we are loved even when we feel unlovable, that we belong even when the ground comes out from under us, to be for each other a surprising generosity, a sudden sweetness, a sign of hope for the start of a new day. Together, we can be this brave. So come, let us celebrate together." I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our opening song, number 1012 in the teal hymnal, When I Am Frightened. Rick, can you play it one time all the way through for us? Thanks.
Please remain standing for the chalice lighting. I've invited Lily Wald to light our chalice. Please join us in saying the chalice lighting word. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action.
River Bob asked me to tell you why I'm here. I've been here about 30 years or something. I lose track of time. It's a long time. Maureen and I together, my wife. And I'm here because I have opportunities to grow and stretch. I've held just about every role there is except finance, and Maureen will tell you that's a good thing. I should not be on the finance committee. I was the part-time director of religious ed back in the 90s. I did Elizabeth, like someone's falling. But I was an out lesbian, and I was being a teacher. I was directing religious ed in the 90s. That was radical for this congregation to do that. People were losing their jobs. Teachers were losing their jobs if they were known to be lesbian and gay at that time. And so, wow. I've been here through many ups and downs of pledge drives. We always get through it. We always come through. That's one thing I know about this group. We've had pain and hurt over differences in how we saw ministers and how we saw issues. There was a point in time when we were going to vote on being a welcoming congregation, which is an official designation within the Unitarian Universalist denomination, and it means that you are opening your arms and very clearly saying we want lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgender people here. Again, way back in the day when that was just way radical. And we had some really difficult conversations. We had some conversations where we bared our hearts and our souls, and it was hard. And we voted actually. I went into the vote wondering if we were going to do it. And we did it with like one dissenting vote or something. Yay, South Valley. And you were here for me when we lost our nephew. And we held his memorial here 20 years ago. You were here when Maureen and I got married. It's been 3 times. She says no more. The first time was 1990. And again, no one was having weddings, and of course it wasn't legal, but we did it, and we wore white gowns, and she wore a white gown for me. It's the last time she wore a dress. And Reverend Barbara Bush at the time did our ceremony, and then legally, just a couple years ago, we were down at the City County building, and Reverend Patty was our officiant for a short ceremony to add and do the legal part. So, and then there was one in between there. We went to California, and we were like, it's legal there, let's go. And you keep forgiving me and celebrating me and teasing me and loving me, and that's why I'm here.
To invite the young and young at heart to come forward for our time for allegiance. All right, good morning. Get as close as you can, because I have a book today. I'm sorry to the rest of you out there, but I'd love to share it with you sometime if you'd like to check it out. That is really close, Maddie. I did say close. You're right. I should have expected that. All right. So this book is called I Am Human by Susan Verde, with art by Peter Reynolds. I was born, a miracle, one of billions, but unique.
human. I am always learning. Do you see what he's learning about? Butterflies, yeah. I see a caterpillar and a butterfly. I'm finding my way and choosing my path on this incredible journey. It's a very colorful journey. I have big dreams and I see possibility. I have endless curiosity. I make discoveries. I have a feeling of wonder and I am amazed by nature. Do you see those awesome pictures? He's swimming with some fish. I have a playful side. I find joy in friendships. I am human. But being human means that I am not perfect. I make mistakes. I can hurt others and my words, my actions, and even with my silence. I can be hurt too. Can you think of times that you have hurt someone? Nope, never. Grace has never hurt anybody. Can you think of times that you have been hurt? That is one way that we are all alike. We all have hurt people, and we all get hurt. I can be fearful of things I don't yet understand, and timid to try something new. You see any things he's trying? Yeah, high dive. I have a heavy heart when I feel sadness. I am human. But then I remind myself that because I am human, I can make choices. Okay, we are very disturbed that he's standing on the diving board without a swimming suit on. Just so that all of you back there know that. It'll be fine. I think he's gonna fly. I think you're right. I think he's not diving. I think he's gonna fly. Nah. Okay, so back to the book. But then I remind myself that because I am human, I can make choices. I can move forward. A poor choice can become a better choice with thoughtfulness. A bad day can become a great day with kindness. I can act with compassion and lend a helping hand. I can treat others with equality and be fair. I can choose not to fight, but instead to listen and find common ground. And I can say, I'm sorry. I can ask for forgiveness. I am not alone. I am connected to my friends, to my family, to the world. We are all humans together. It's a great book. And I will keep trying to be the best version of me. I am full of hope. I am human. He has sprouted rings and flown. It's true. All right. I invite you to join us downstairs for Ari.
Change of plans. Let's now enter into a time of prayer, of reflection, of meditation. Find a comfortable seat, maybe put both feet on the ground, take a deep breath, if you want to. The theologian Howard Thurman, he talks about the centering moment, the time when we set aside the distractions and busyness of everyday life. We focus on the things that are divine, that are holy to us, however we define holy. And we seek the holy now in the temple of our own hearts. We lift up those who are lonely and those who lack for food or housing or for the means to enjoy life in the way they wish. We lift up those who struggle with their health, be it physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. May they find healing. And we lift up the caregivers in the world. May they know that through their work, they bring love into our space. We lift up those affected by the epidemic of shootings. We lift up our own broken hearts in this gathered community and strive to understand the spiritual crisis that lies behind this massive tear in the fabric of America. May we find reason and compassion. We celebrate those who fight for justice. May we draw hope from their example. We lift up those who are excluded from their families because of what they believe or who they love. May they find peace. And we celebrate the gathering of families, those biological families, and the families that we choose, that we create out of love. We celebrate the things that give us hope, the eternal possibilities of learning, of love, of growth. Let us see the beauty and holiness in the streets that we travel in. Let us see the beauty and holiness in the people we serve. Let us see the beauty and holiness in each other. Let us see the beauty and holiness in ourselves. And may we all be held in the heart of love. Amen.
Hello, my name is Ann Scarborough, and I am representing the board today on behalf of our junior high youth. I just want to mention that our theme for our stewardship drive this year is Dreams and Deeds. And that's what this community is all about, transforming our dreams into deeds. And a concrete example of that is our junior high youth, who came to the board in November and presented a proposal to improve our playground here, which is in sadly need of repair. We approved that, and we've been running a fundraiser called Project Playground. And there's a blurb on the very back page of your bulletin today that speaks about that. I'm here to let you know that it's drawing to a close. Your last opportunity to donate to Project Playground is going to be Thursday, January 31st. We've reached about 60% of our goal. The goal was $4,000, and we're at about $2,400. So I'm just lifting this up to make everyone aware of that, because it's a very worthy cause. And I really believe in leading by example, so I have 2 checks today, one for Project Playground and one for No Kid Hungry, which you're going to hear more about. Thank you.
For those that might not know, I lost my son in October. Excuse me. I lost my son John in October. He would have been 20 this month. John taught us a lot of things, but one of the main things he taught me was the importance of giving. And he was always giving. He was always looking for ways to help other people. And he was really big on charities. One of his favorite charities was No Kid Hungry. When he was, of course, in elementary school, we would pin his artwork and his homework on the fridge. When he grew up and was a teenager, he would post the thank you letters from the charities that he gave to on the fridge. So I want to thank South Valley for thinking of John. I think it's wonderful that we're sharing our donations with No Kid Hungry. We'd like to encourage everybody to go downstairs afterwards and buy some baked goods. Keep John in your hearts. If you please join me reading the words printed in your order of service. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth with unity and sustain it with our gifts.
Blessings on these gifts and the givers. Mary Oliver, poet, I think poet laureate of UU's, that's how I think of her. She passed away on January 17th at the age of 83, and she is one of America's best loved poets, and her works has graced many UU services here and everywhere. And we will continue to keep her close and use her words. May perpetual light shine upon her. This is Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the life in the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things.
Good morning again. It's funny how this stool is a little uncomfortable. I guess the former Marine in me is not jiving with this. But I want to tell you about a soldier that I met in Afghanistan, and I need to warn you, this is a story about war, and it's a rough story. So the soldier's name is Angel, and like a lot of soldiers in Afghanistan at the time, this was 2012, he had also done a few tours in Iraq as well. And during his last tour in Iraq, he was out on a vehicle patrol, and while they were driving around, a car came driving up to an intersection they were passing through. When the car didn't slow down, the gunner in the turret of the vehicle he was in fired a warning shot. And the car didn't slow down still, and the gunner fired a burst of bullets into the car. And the soldiers in the truck could now see that the occupants of the car were civilians. They were a family. And the car stopped, and the driver got out, and he was bleeding from his stomach. And the convoy just drove on, and they left the man there. And Angel, who was a medic, he knew he could have saved that man's life, but he didn't say anything. He just let them drive off. And he knew almost immediately that by his silence, he had done something deeply contrary to his sense of right. When Angel got back from Iraq, he got back to the States, things got bad for him. He was tormented by shame about what he allowed to have happen. He couldn't sleep. As so often happens, he started drinking to try and get himself to sleep. His wife left him. Eventually his unit redeployed to Afghanistan, and he got to fall back into that rhythm, but he was a shell of the man he used to be. He couldn't concentrate, he still couldn't sleep, and there was no joy in him. Angel didn't know it at the time, but he was suffering from moral injury. Moral injury is a condition that happens when someone commits an act or allows an act to happen that they know is wrong based on their most deeply held sense of what is right. In military settings, it can take a lot of forms. It can mean betraying a colleague or using more violence than is required for a situation, or some kind of incident involving civilians. The effect of a moral injury on a person depends on how bad the act was, but also what other kinds of supports a person has. People who've developed spiritual resiliency, either from practicing a faith or simply having the support of a family and friends, they can sometimes recover on their own. But for folks who were involved in something more severe, something like Angel, or who don't have a built-in support of a religious practice or family members, their symptoms can involve self-destructive behaviors. And one thing I'll say about Angel, he was a devout Catholic, so that did not inoculate him from what happened to him. So these self-destructive behaviors can run the gamut from substance abuse to self-sabotage of one's career or relationships, all the way up to taking one's life. And there's this cliche that there are no atheists in foxholes. And that's a dumb cliche, I'm sorry. I've seen for myself how the experience of war can actually destroy a person's faith in God or faith in anything good. Moral injury is considered one of the 3 signature wounds of the Afghanistan-Iraq era. The other 2 are traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. It's interesting that they're all wounds that are mostly invisible. So veterans can carry wounds that are often invisible. And it's important to differentiate between moral injury and PTSD. They're 2 different things. But moral injury isn't just for soldiers, though. I've spoken with public school teachers who brought their very highest ideals to the classroom, only to find themselves in the role of delivering an education system that they felt was not only inadequate, but actually actively harmful to children. And while I'm not a parent, every parent I've talked to about this readily admits that there are times where they did things to their kids that they knew they shouldn't have, either out of temper or misguided attempts at discipline or just sheer exhaustion. It's hard to raise a family. If we're going to design a country that was from scratch, that was unfriendly to families, it would look a lot like how we designed this country inadvertently. So, folks in the civilian uniformed services are especially vulnerable too. My father worked for Customs and Border Patrol in the 60s, and while he was going to law school, and judging from his stories, that work has changed enormously. I really think this has got to be a really hard time to be a decent person working at the Border Patrol. And yes, I think most of the people working there want to be decent people. And people working in the social services, I think, are really vulnerable to moral injury. I used to manage a homeless shelter in upstate New York, and I remember having to tell people with no place to go that they had to leave the shelter because their 30 days, there was a 30-day limit, their 30 days were up. I think any line of work that involves idealism creates a risk of moral injury because the work is lined up with a sense of identity of what is virtuous. So, I manage a homeless shelter. Of course I'm a good person, except when I'm turning people out. So in English folklore, there are stories about people called sin eaters. Sin eaters. And I know we don't use sin language in UU. That's interesting though. When someone died, the sin eater would come to where the body lay in vigil. And in some versions of the story, the sin eater would eat a meal directly off the chest of the deceased. In others, they just waved the food over the body. But this process of eating this food would transfer the accumulated sins of a lifetime from the deceased to the sin eater. And then the deceased would go to heaven with a clean slate. And they never really discussed what would happen to the sin eater. So, now my fabulous professor of religious history at seminary would accuse me of being presentist when I say this, but man, people were weird back then. I was like, that is something. But it's a useful metaphor. Are we so different? I think I think many people present here experience the role of sin eater when we find ourselves caught up in systems not of our own making. Most of us need to work. Most of us need to function in society. And that means making compromises. And society creates certain situations where every choice might involve some kind of wrongdoing. In those cases, the person who's forced to do something who they know is wrong, that person ends up with moral injury. And they're a kind of sin eater. They eat the sins of a society that won't take responsibility for its own actions. So that soldier kicking down doors in Fallujah at night, that teacher who's told to teach to a standardized test, that judge that's forced to give a minimum sentence that doesn't fit the crime, they are sin eaters, suffering moral injury on behalf of all of us. For those of us who are caught up in that, how do we recover? Where do we turn to for forgiveness? The doctors and therapists and chaplains who are working on this condition of moral injury are still wrestling with how to bring healing to folks. And by the way, Reverend Chris Antal is a chaplain at the Philadelphia VA now. And he's a leader in this work of moral injury. He's one of those guys doing the work. And currently there are 3 sort of major theories or approaches about how to help folks heal from moral injury. One is sort of individually directed, so that could be individual therapy. And there's a thing they do called adaptive exposure. And that's where they ask folks suffering from moral injury to repeatedly relive the experience until the trauma, until the power of the experience is drained from it. It's just another thing. So that's the individually directed. And then there's socially directed, which is group therapy and the kinds of things you'd expect from that. And then there's spiritually directed, so individual, group, and then spiritually directed. And this can involve things like rituals. I actually participated in this ritual after I came back from Afghanistan. They called it a buffalo circle. It was a mix of civilians and veterans, and you stand in a circle around an altar. We created a little altar with objects that we had brought that were sacred to us. And you start by standing in 2 circles. At first there's an inner circle and an outer circle. And the inner circle is civilians, and the outer circle is veterans. And during this period, the veterans recite a litany explaining why they did what they did, what the idealism that was behind it, and how they wanted to serve, and how it was part of their idealism. And also how they were hurt by what they saw and did and allowed to have happen while they were over there, deployed. That's the first part of the ritual. In the second part of the ritual, the circles exchange places. The veterans move to, and I get emotional talking about it because it was so intense, but the veterans move to the inside, and the civilians move to the outside. And the veterans read a litany, the civilians read a litany about welcoming them home, accepting their responsibility for the part of the veterans, and helping them, making a vow to help them to heal. It is unbelievably powerful. I was released from so much when I went through that experience. So, there's also a school of thought within the spiritual focus of the ways that it says that a victim of moral injury can find relief by receiving forgiveness from a benign moral authority. A benign moral authority. That is, if the person brings their guilt and shame and confession to someone that they trust and who they believe has a kind of integrity, that person may find healing and a renewed sense of wholeness. I don't know if that works for every person, but I've seen it work with some folks myself. And I think also therapists are finding that some combination of these different disciplines, these approaches, may be what works best for people. So going back to the story of Angel the medic, while he was in Afghanistan, out of desperation, he went to see Chaplain Chris Antal, who happens to be a UU minister. And Chaplain Antal heard his story, and he asked Angel if he had any talents, if there's anything he was good at. And Angel said, yeah, I'd like to write songs and play them on my guitar. I'm good at this. And Chris told him to make an offering, to make an amends to that man in Iraq by writing him a song. And Angel did that. He wrote a song naming what he did and apologizing to that man in the song. And he played the song for our little UU congregation in Kandahar. Kandahar is an airfield in Afghanistan. And he was somehow released. After that, he began to sleep again. He began to find joy again, and he was freed somewhat from the shame. He never stopped knowing that he did something wrong, but he could go on with his life. I have a similar story. When I was training as a chaplain at the VA hospital in New York City, I met a patient I had met several times before in the substance abuse ward. This time, I met him down at the medical floor where he was being treated for the physical consequences of his decades of substance abuse. Because I had met him before, we had a little rapport going. And so I broached the topic of his time in Vietnam. And this guy, I'll call him Tom. And Tom told me how 40 years later, he could still see the faces of the men that he killed there. 40 years later. And I asked him if he could see the face of someone he killed right at that moment, right now, when we were talking together in his room. And he said, yes, I can see him right in front of me. And I said, if he could hear you now, what would you say to him? Tom hesitated for a moment. And then he began to apologize to this man. He apologized to the man. He apologized to the man's family. And finally, he began apologizing to God, for the things that he had done. And when he finally stopped, I said quietly, I think they could hear you. I think they could hear you. And Tom just looked at me. And of course, the reality of hospital chaplaincy, at that moment, a nurse came in to do a procedure, so the visit was over. You have to control those things when you're in the hospital. So I just said a quick prayer for him, and I let him be. I think it's important to note here, I was wearing a collar during this visit too, so I was showing up as that kind of moral authority. Well, a week later, I was with a couple other chaplains leading a small group worship service up in the substance abuse ward, and Tom was there. And at a certain point in the service, we invited the patients to share what they were grateful for. And out of the blue, a complete surprise to me, Tom spoke up and he said, since I was able to apologize to the man I killed, I've been straight. I'm finally at peace. I was just shocked. I believe we're in an epidemic of moral injury. We're in an epidemic of moral injury. And that requires a lot of things. And perhaps we need to develop our ability to forgive ourselves, or barring that, to develop our ability to know when we need to seek the assistance of a benign moral authority. This idea of a benign moral authority is a funny thing. I think in this day and age, it's not as clear who the moral authorities are. Can we be our own benign moral authority? I think that's possible, but once a person has suffered from moral injury, they're not likely to feel like they have much moral authority. They more like feel like they've lost their moral authority. And I know that I'm the minister here in the room, but I am definitely not saying that I'm the moral authority here. I'm really not. In fact, I think that the moral authority in a UU congregation lies in the congregation itself. Our moral authority lies in the covenant that we hold with each other. The point of a covenant is not what we do when we fall out of covenant, but how we return to being in covenant again. And that strikes me as being similar to how we recover from moral injury. We need to honestly acknowledge what we've done, to confess and apologize, to strive to make amends, and to begin again in love. In that way, we return to covenant and hopefully, maybe, heal from moral injury. Now, I know this has been a really challenging topic, yet another one, and I deeply appreciate everyone for staying engaged with it. But I think talking about moral injury can actually lead to some happiness, or at least less suffering. In her poem, Wild Geese, Mary Oliver says, "Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Tell me about your despair, yours, and I will tell you mine." That's something worth doing. Naming our condition is a first step towards avoiding it and healing from it. Perhaps some of the situations I talked about today evoke similar feelings for folks here in the congregation. My prayer for us is that we can examine the sins that we've eaten, that we can see our moral injury clearly, and that we can earn the right to forgive ourselves. May it be so.
Together, we're going to do a litany of atonement. If you'll open your gray hymnals to 637. I'll read the bold if you will read the italics. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. And for losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For those in so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. If you'll please open your teal hymn books to 1031, we will sing together, Filled with Loving Kindness. Please stand as you're willing and able. 1031.
Amen.
My prayer is that we examine the sins that we've eaten, that we see our moral injury clearly, and that we find healing, and that we are able to forgive ourselves. Our worship is over, our service begins. Go in peace, gentle people.